Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the Minister for Youth and Sports, who is also the Minister responsible for Employment and Industrial Relations, and also his Assistant Minister who's here with us, Alipati Nangata. The representatives from the different UN agencies, thank you very much for being here. I'd like to just probably give you a quick snapshot in respect of where we are in Fiji, and vis-a-vis the International Youth Day, which talks about international solidarity. I think many a times, not just in Fiji of course, but internationally and globally, whenever we want to highlight any particular issue or any particular group that may be, for example, be suffering from being marginalized to the periphery of society, being on the outer bounds, whether it's people who are able or disabled, whether people who are young or people who are old. We have a young population in Fiji. 70% of our entire population is below the age of 40. So all those of you in this room who are below the age of 40, you are the majority in this country. Those of us over the age of 40, we are the minority in this country. In other countries, for example in Japan, where a vast number of the people are actually much older. You actually will go to a supermarket where a person packing your groceries or pushing the trolley in the car park is somebody who's 75 years old. You won't see that in Fiji. So different parts of the world have different demographics. And if we are able to, they have obviously aged care issues there. There are other parts of the world where we have people who are elderly, who are neglected. Recently we saw some news pieces, for example, from Australia, where there was a bit of a scandal in one of the aged care homes where people are being neglected. People who are supposed to look after them weren't looking after them. We have then other parts of the world where people who are young are being neglected. Perhaps their voices aren't being heard. Perhaps enough medical services aren't being provided to them, or they don't have access to education. Vast numbers of young people in vast countries, many countries in the world, don't actually have access to education. However, if we're going to look at this problem from what we call a dichotomous approach, like us and them situation, you'll never be able to find a good solution. You need to be able to look at the problems in society from what I call a very inclusive approach. And this is why I can really relate to this year's theme, which is about intergenerational solidarity. In other words, that the youth can learn from those people who are not so young. And the not so young can also learn a lot from those who are young. You will find many people in different homes where people who are in their 40s or 50s or 60s are being taught by young people how to use a mobile phone, how to use Viber, how to use WhatsApp. On the other hand, there are many elderly people who may be teaching young people how to look after the environment, how to, for example, go crabbing or looking after the mangrove. All of that is what we call a shared sense of inclusiveness, a shared learning platform. So if we move away from a dichotomous approach, we'll be able to do a lot more. Let me put into perspective. In 1972, I was 7 years old. Yes, I was 7 years old. There was a cyclone Bibi that came. It was the largest cyclone we've ever had in Fiji. The next big cyclone that came to Fiji was 10 years afterwards. Today, you as young people have to face, and we as a country have to face, nearly 2 or 3 cyclones in one season. If we don't get one cyclone in a season, we think it's such a great deal. But in those days, it was a rare thing to get a cyclone. Today, it is the norm. Before in Fiji, a lot of people did not finish even primary school or high school, or did not even go to university because they did not have free education. We've had so many people who've said to us, we wish in our time we had free education. I had so many young or elderly women say to us, in our family there were 7 of us, there were 5 of us, And because our parents did not have enough money to pay school fees for everybody, they decided that the boys would go to school and the girls would stay at home and do the cooking and the cleaning and all of that, because one day they would get married in any case and become mothers. So there's no need for them to go to school. They were the choices that people then had to make. We've had so many people who said to us, I was such a good student, but my parents could not afford to send me to high school or could not afford to send me to university. Today, of course, you do not have that issue. You have free education. But today you have cyclones which you have to face. People in the past did not have to face that many cyclones. People in the past, of course, I remember when you had to get a phone call from a friend, it was such a big deal because very few people had landlines. You had those phones you dial and you had landlines. Or you'd go to a public phone to make a phone call. Today we have people on Facebook posting what they had for breakfast. That's how rapidly things have changed. So you may have easier access to communications, but you also have cyberbullying. You face that problem. The older generation did not face cyberbullying. You have people who get stalked on social media. People get berated on social media, whereas before they did not have those challenges. The reason I'm highlighting all these issues to you is that every generation has either a set of opportunities or a set of problems. And it's our ability to be able to learn from those challenges or those opportunities, both in the past and the present, will we be able to address today's problems. So the narrative should not be about us and them. The narrative should be about, well, what are the issues we face? What are the issues they faced? What are the opportunities we have and what are the opportunities they had? Because if we are able to get on that common platform, then we'll be able to address many of the issues, many of the challenges that we face today. Today in Fiji, like I mentioned, 70% of the entire population is below the age of 40. 65% is below the age of 65. So as a government, we have to ensure the vast majority of the people in this country have access to education, have access to those services, have access to jobs. How do we create jobs? How do we create access to medical services? We have to be able to provide the right environment. We have to ensure that the young people feel confident in the system. The young people need to also understand very quickly, understand the economy. We cannot talk about issues, we cannot talk about jobs, we cannot talk about opportunities, inclusiveness, empowering women, empowering youth, if we do not understand how the economy works. If we do not understand what we as individual Fijians can do to be able to ensure that our economy flourishes, to be able to ensure that there's stability, because without stability, without consistency in policies, you actually forego many opportunities. You will not be able to get jobs if there's inconsistency in policies. If there's no stability, you won't be able to have jobs. You won't be able to have career paths. Today in Fiji, there's not a single Fijian doctor that can carry out open heart surgery. In the 21st century in Fiji, not a single Fijian doctor can do open heart surgery. The question we have to ask, why did that happen? But more importantly, what can we do to ensure that we have Fijian doctors who can do open heart surgery? What policy steps are we taking? What opportunities are we giving? Today, the world is changing quite rapidly, as highlighted by one of our speakers earlier on. We have Russia that invaded Ukraine. We had a pandemic, a 1 in a 100-year event. Nobody expected that the world's borders would shut down. Nobody. In February of 2020, nobody thought that every single country would shut down their borders, but it actually happened, and it happened so quickly. 110,000 Fijians lost their jobs. It's not just about people who worked in the tourism sector, or worked in a hotel, or flew a plane, or was a flight attendant, or was a gardener at the hotel, or the taxi driver at the hotel. It was also the ladies who, for example, were selling boiled evi, lobo packs, roti parcel, mithai, outside the airport, not to the tourists, but to the workers who worked at the airport. The workers who worked at ATS, who worked at Fiji Airways, or the ladies who made handicraft and were given a small space in the hotel lobby or in some corridor of the hotel to sell their handicraft to the tourists. They did not work for the hotels, but they made a living from those tourists. So when the tourists aren't coming, they had no living too. So these were the challenges that were presented to us. So as a country, as young people, because you will very soon be occupying positions of authority. You already have positions of authority. But in terms of political decision-making, administrative, governmental decision-making, you'll be in those positions very soon. And for you to be able to ensure that you have a brighter future, to be able to ensure that our country has a brighter future, you need to be able to understand what the economy is about. How does the world function? Why is the price of things going up? There's so much information available. You need to be able to educate yourself. Facebook is great, but we don't believe everything that's on Facebook. As I was saying to somebody the other day, that if I go up and put a post and say, I saw the frog eat the horse, many people say, where did it take place? What color was the frog? What color was the horse? As opposed to questioning whether a frog actually can eat a horse or not. So it's our individual responsibility to be able to ensure that we have the correct information. Because by ensuring and developing a culture within yourself and developing a culture within the country of getting the right information, getting the right narrative, we'll be able to have a much brighter future. And in that way also we'll be able to learn from the generations. Climate change is a critical issue. There are many practices that were indigenous practices, traditional practices, that in fact met a lot of the challenges of climate change. We cannot say that everything in the past was wrong, because in fact some of those practices are in fact very good to be able to meet those challenges. So it's the same way that I'm trying to demonstrate to you. Please, if you rely on the theme of this International Youth Day, which is the intergeneration solidarity, for me it means intergeneration collaboration, intergeneration learnings, because the older people also will learn from you and you should also learn from them. And in that way we have that mutual respect. We cannot have what we call a dichotomous approach to our problems. We must be inclusive. We must be able to willing to be learn from each other, and how we can use those learnings for the betterment of our own individual lives, betterment of our communities, betterment of our society, indeed the betterment of our country. So congratulations once again to all the stakeholders that have been involved. It'd be great to talk to some of you, all of you individually. I'd like to thank, of course, all the UN agencies that have been, providing a lot of support, not just in Fiji, but throughout the region itself. They bring a lot of specialized skill sets in the different areas, whether it's UNICEF and various other areas, and UNAIDS, you'll hear from Renata, the various challenges. And I think what is really important today in Fiji, we have a very liberal approach in respect of our ability to talk about philosophical issues, to talk about, for example, teenage pregnancy, to talk about sexual assault. These are critical issues as to why these things actually take place. Our ability to ensure that we respect each other, and I'm talking about across gender also. So you'll see different policies being put in place to ensure that the level of inclusiveness, the level of respect is maintained. This is, of course, and I have to say this is, of course, an election year too. And I'm not here to, electioneer or campaign, but you'll also see a lot of narratives developing, and you as the youth really are the critical voice, because if we have regressive politics, you won't have a brighter future. We must be able to have a political landscape where people provide solutions. For people to win political office, they must not get into racism. They must not get into provincialism. They must not get into gender disparity. They must be able to ensure the policies, the philosophy must be inclusive as to how we can, as a country, become strong, become inclusive, and indeed have a sustainable future for all of us. Minak Vakaliv, and wish you all a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Honorable.